The dog, man's most trusted furry companion, an animal we've fully welcomed into our homes and hearts. Every year we spend a fortune indulging the nation's 8 million dogs. It's fast become the most mollycoddled animal known to man. But the one area in which we spend the most money is dog food. As a nation of pet lovers, we spend over £2 billion a year on commercial pet foods. However, there's an increasing number of dog owners who believe we've been sold a pup when it comes to what we feed our dogs.
So I think the public have no idea what's going into the dog food that they're buying.
When you look at the advertising budget of the big pet food companies, it must have an effect on the quality of the food that's inside it.
A very cheap dog food is cheap for a reason. It's not because the companies decided out of the goodness of their hearts to make a cheap pet food. It's because the ingredients in it are extremely cheap ingredients.
If there's too much or too little of one thing, it can really lead to problems quite quickly.
But has the chase for convenience in the dog food industry gone a step too far? An increasing number of dog owners are deeply concerned that the welfare of our dogs is playing second fiddle to big business.
The dog food industry in Britain is basically a license to print money. The market is dominated by 5 companies. They have 80% of their market.
Independent pet supplier Scampers used to stock all types of food on their shelves. Slowly they realised that whilst there were a lot of different brand names, they were all owned by just a handful of multinationals.
What happened is they'd gradually taken over my business without me knowing, because all of these were previously independent brands. It's takeover by stealth. That's what they're doing.
When you look at the advertising budget and the packaging budget of the big pet food companies, it must have an effect on the quality of the food that's inside.
If you've got $1 billion business and you remove 2% of the most expensive ingredient, you've just saved an awful lot of money.
At its simplest, the raw diet is about feeding your dog a daily diet of fresh, raw, uncooked meat, alongside a small portion of vegetables. The belief is that raw meat best mimics the diet a dog would eat in the wild. Because the meat is uncooked, advocates of a raw diet believe it offers the best nutritional value. A key part of the raw diet is also uncooked bones. Again, it's felt that if dogs naturally chew on them in the wild, why stop them from doing so in our homes?
Far more dogs will have much healthier teeth, will not need dental treatment, will not need dental extractions if they're feeding on raw bones than otherwise.
There's a couple of rules you must abide by. The bones you feed must be raw, not cooked. And you need to get a good mix of meat and bone and some vegetables.
Handling raw meat isn't for the squeamish. So some raw food companies have taken the blood and guts element out by processing it all into neat little packages. Whilst raw feeders are adamant that a natural diet is the best way to feed a dog, they're even more passionate with their criticisms of commercially processed dog food. One concern is that it contains ingredients dogs don't need.
A processed diet has grain in it, for example. A dog does not need grain. It cannot process grain effectively. That is why when you feed your dog a processed diet which has grain in, there is an awful lot of poo coming out the other end, because all it's doing is filling the dog up and the dog can't actually utilise that.
Poor nutrition can also lead to other problems.
Skin allergies are rife, digestive problems. I mean, whoever would have heard of dogs with IBD, IBS, colitis?
There's a huge problem in dogs with obesity and diabetes and diseases to do with nutrition. And it's interesting, if you have a dog, say, with diabetes, your vet will often sell you a special prescription diet, which is essentially high protein, low carbohydrate, which is what they should be eating anyway.
In my belief, about 9 out of 10 visits to the vet are caused by the diet the dogs are on.
Vets should be the ones talking about nutrition. All we seem to do is go along with what the big pet food companies say.
What the pet food companies are called into is to really help out in terms of nutritional training for the vets, but there's no particular axe that they're grinding when they're doing that.
I think that vets get an element of nutritional training, but unfortunately it's product. I call it product training.
But at the most prestigious veterinary establishment in the country, the Royal Veterinary College, experts insist there is nutritional value to be had in commercial pet foods.
the requirements of an animal changes as they grow. So the formulations change to their needs. There's some commercial foods that are excellent. There's a lot of evidence to show that they are promoting optimal health. When diets are formulated for different life stages, it's not a gimmick. We now frequently encounter dogs that are in their 20s. And there's some studies that looked at lifespan of animals, and they actually can change by a few years depending on the food that they're eating or how they're fed. So I think that there's some truth to the point that food is having an effect in the lifespan.
Regardless as to which side of the argument you're on, one fact is certain. Most dog owners in Britain want the absolute best for their dogs. But most of us first confront dog food on our supermarket shelves. And with so many different types, deciding which one to give your dog can be tricky. For many, labelling is a major hurdle.
Meat and animal
minimum 37%, including minimum 4% chicken.
Oh, we've got some chicken. That's quite good.
The Pet Food Manufacturers Association is the principal trade body representing the UK pet food industry.
The thing you have to remember about pet food is we don't have legislation written just for us. What we have is legislation that covers feed industry. So it's really aimed at farmers and people who are in the feed industry. They don't want to make different regulations for pet food, so they've lumped pet food in with feed animals, but they're very different. So we don't really have the ability to use the terms often that we would like to. Meat and animal derivatives is what we are required to call the parts of the animal that we use once the human food chain has taken what it needed.
Most commercial foods also contain a wide range of additives and flavourings. One of the key ingredients in most commercial dog foods is the use of colorants.
No one's going to buy dog food that looks like a grey goop, so the first thing they do is they add some colouring to it, they add artificial colours to it.
Most dogs don't care what it looks like, they like what it smells like and what it tastes like.
Sometimes they're used not really for the dog, because the dog is pretty colourblind.
The bigger pet food companies are selling to the people and not selling to the dogs.
When it comes to the welfare of our beloved dogs, it's hard to find an entirely impartial opinion. One watchdog, however, is seeking to demystify the jargon.
So it says healthy digestion, strong muscles, healthy teeth, healthy heart. Now, the problem is there's no tests that you need to pass in order to say that your food helps to promote a healthy heart. It says natural quality ingredients for healthy digestion, but all you have there is very, very broad terms that really could mean anything. I mean, the main ingredients, cereals, meat and animal derivatives, vegetable protein extracts.
A legal but controversial ingredient, propylene glycol, is another worry for many dog owners.
Propylene glycol primarily is a preservative in this one, but actually that's one of the main constituents of antifreeze. When you're looking at buying a dog food, the first thing to do, because there really is no way of telling what's in there if they don't tell you, if they do use these umbrella terms, then just put it back on the shelf.
There are certain rules about food labelling. So when you're looking at a bag, if it says chicken and rice, it has to have a minimum of 26% chicken. If it's rich in chicken, a minimum of 14% chicken. And then if it says with, it only has to have a minimum of 4%. And then if it's flavour.
One of the most alarming accusations being thrown at the commercial brands revolves around them having infiltrated the pet healthcare system. It's felt that the very people we turn to for advice on our dog's dietary needs, namely vets, aren't quite as impartial as they would like us to believe.
When vets do their training, they get about half a day usually on canine nutrition.
Indeed, with commercial pet food products often taking pride of place in veterinary receptions, it's felt that there is a commercial connection between the nutritional advice given by vets and the food on sale in their practices. But things aren't as straightforward as we'd like to think. As well as worries with the quality of the food in commercial brands, there are emerging concerns about the safety of the raw food diet. The virtue of the raw diet, uncooked meat, is also its major drawback, particularly with the threat of salmonella.
Dogs are very prone to salmonella.
In the States, there have been warnings by the Centers of Disease Control about pet food having contaminants like salmonella, and that being a health concern for children. So the types of salmonella that are being seen in children can be traced to the food that dogs are eating.
One area of canine health that offers important clues as to the value of certain diets is where the food enters their bodies: the mouth.
Gum disease is the commonest disease that we see in veterinary practice.
Peter Southerden isn't convinced that a raw diet is the best option where dental hygiene is concerned.
I've certainly seen cases of dogs that eat a raw meaty bone diet with dental disease. So feeding a raw diet doesn't necessarily prevent it. There is the risk of tooth fracture, certainly if you're feeding larger bones.
The raw food diets, they're making claims, but they can't back them up yet.
I think what we're going to see in the future is all these big corporate pet food companies bringing out so-called natural brands.
You can't necessarily draw the conclusion that because a wolf eats a certain diet, that a Chihuahua necessarily would benefit from the same diet. You know, they're very different. The shapes of their mouths are very different. What they're capable of chewing is very different. The bite force that a small dog would have compared with a wolf will be hugely different. I can't say just simply because it's a dog and it looks like a wolf that therefore its dietary requirements would be the same. There are people that would suggest that even captive wolves have better oral health if they're fed a commercial diet than a raw diet. So that completely contradicts the idea that a raw diet is better.
A lot of claim about dogs in the wild, and dogs didn't start off eating commercial food. Well, nobody did, and there's a lot of things that have occurred because of improvement in food quality. A lot of it is based on people's perceptions and misconceptions about what is the right thing to feed a dog. Dogs are domesticated animals, and so they have evolved since becoming domesticated, and therefore their needs might have changed.
But if the debate cannot be settled by looking at the ancestral habits of the wolf, how can well-meaning dog lovers provide the best nutrition for their favourite four-legged friend?
When you're looking at buying a dog food, use your common sense, really. You know, nutrition, it's not rocket science. We all feed ourselves and we feed our children just based on common sense, and we do a very good job of it. And it's exactly the same for our dogs. We instinctively know, most of us, what a dog should be eating and what a dog shouldn't be eating.
People do have different ideas about how to feed their dog. That's understandable. But ultimately, it's the look and the health of your dog.